The hall fell silent the moment the bride's veil was lifted. Cameras flashed, guests gasped, and the billionaire, Tunde Owolabi, stood rooted to the marble floor, his face drained of all colour. His jaw trembled as he stared at the woman before him. The bride no one wanted, the woman he had promised to marry out of pride and pity. But now, as her face emerged under the crystal chandelier, his breath hitched. It wasn't the face he remembered, her eyes, wide, haunting, familiar, locked on his with a mixture of love and vengeance. He took a slow step back, his fingers twitching at his side. The music stopped. Somewhere in the back, an old woman muttered a prayer, clutching her wrapper tight. Even the air in the grand hall seemed to pause, waiting for his next move. Tunde's mind spun violently. The guests, hundreds of them, politicians, CEOs, dignitaries, whispered among themselves. He heard fragments. Is he fainting? What's wrong with the bride? The priest, confused, leaned closer, his voice hesitant. My son, are you all right? Tunde tried to speak, but his lips quivered. Every inch of his body screamed to run. Because standing before him was not the plain, quiet woman from the orphanage he had agreed to marry to prove his humility. No, this woman's face, this perfect, chilling resemblance, belonged to Aisha, his late fiancée, the one he had lost 3 years ago in a tragic fire that had burned down his estate. The same lips, the same birthmark under the eye. He felt his knees weaken. A trembling hand covered his mouth. His bodyguard moved closer, sensing something was wrong, but Tunde waved him off, eyes never leaving the bride. She blinked, tears shimmering, and whispered so softly that only he could hear. You kept your promise, my love. The words hit him like a storm. The crowd saw only a strange reunion, the groom frozen, the bride speaking tenderly, but inside him terror bloomed. How could she know those words? Those were the last words Aisha had spoken before the flames swallowed her. He remembered the sound of the collapsing roof, the heat, the helpless screams. He remembered burying her. And yet here she was, alive, standing before him in lace and gold. Sweat rolled down his temple. The hall's chandeliers flickered. Who are you? He whispered. The bride smiled faintly, her eyes glistening with something between love and accusation. I am who you promised to find again, she said. Then, with deliberate calm, she turned toward the guests and curtsied, her voice ringing clear through the hall. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for witnessing this union, one born not of wealth but of fate. Murmurs rippled. Phones recorded. The air grew heavy with confusion and fascination. But Tunde's heart was pounding too fast for reason. Fate? No, this was madness, or a trap. He glanced at his mother's table. The matriarch looked horrified, her lips moving silently in Yoruba prayers. Something dark was unfolding. Tunde stumbled backward, gripping the edge of the altar as if it could hold him steady. The choir began murmuring nervously. The bride stood perfectly still, her face illuminated by the golden light pouring through the glass roof. An almost divine glow that made her look unreal. And in that surreal stillness, one truth struck him. Whether it was Aisha, a twin, or a ghost, his life, his empire, would never be the same after this moment. The guests watched, waiting for him to speak. He finally forced out a broken whisper that echoed through the microphone. This can't be real. The bride's faint smile widened, and the drums outside began again, this time slow, ritualistic. The billionaire had married the bride no one wanted, and now he realized she might not even be among the living. 3 months earlier, Tunde Owolabi sat in his glass-walled office overlooking Victoria Island, staring at the city that called him the Golden Sun of Lagos. He was a man who had everything: money, fame, and respect. But since the fire that took his fiancée, Aisha, his heart had been locked behind a fortress of silence. Every tabloid called him cursed, a man whom love avoided. Women had tried to reach him, but none stayed. Until his mother, Chief Mrs. Morenike Owolabi, called one Sunday evening and said in her no-nonsense voice, "Tunde, it's time you marry." He laughed bitterly. "Marry who, Mama? The heir?" She didn't flinch. "There's a girl from the orphanage in Surulere. Simple, humble, God-fearing. She needs help, and you need peace. Sometimes, wealth must stoop to heal itself." He'd ignored her for weeks, but one day, his mother arrived at his mansion with the girl. She was shy, wrapped in a faded Ankara dress, her head bowed. "Her name is Halima," his mother said. "She cooks, she cleans, and she will never embarrass you." Tunde nodded politely, barely looking up from his phone. Yet something about her voice when she greeted him made him glance again. Soft, almost trembling, like someone who had seen more pain than words could tell. She avoided his eyes, her fingers twisting the edge of her scarf. His mother smiled triumphantly. "You'll marry her next month. The elders have spoken." Tunde wanted to refuse, but the whispers in the city, about him losing his mind about Aisha's ghost, had already started damaging his brand. So, out of pride and exhaustion, he agreed. The news spread like wildfire. "The billionaire is marrying an orphan," screamed the tabloids. People laughed, others pitied, some said he was bewitched. "A man like Tunde marrying a nobody?" His friends jeered at the club. "He's finally lost it." But Tunde didn't care. Or so he told himself. Deep down, he wanted silence, an end to gossip. Maybe this quiet woman could give him peace. He gave his mother the go-ahead, and preparations began. The girl stayed in the guest wing of his mansion, rarely seen. Once, he passed her in the corridor and noticed she had changed. Her walk steadier, her voice firmer. He even thought her eyes looked oddly familiar, but he brushed it off as imagination. After all, everyone reminded him of Aisha these days. As the wedding approached, strange things began happening in his home. The old portrait of Aisha fell off the wall at midnight, shattering the glass. The housekeeper swore she saw a woman standing by the pool at dawn, her white scarf fluttering though there was no wind. The chef said he heard soft humming from the guest room when the girl wasn't there. Tunde dismissed it all as superstition, though each story stirred an unease he refused to name. He told himself he was doing a noble thing, giving a poor woman a chance at life. But some nights when he passed her door, he heard faint sobs that echoed like whispers from another time. The day before the wedding, Tunde stood by his late fiancée's grave in Ikoyi Cemetery. "Aisha," he whispered, staring at the carved marble. "I don't know if I'll ever love again, but I must move on. Forgive me." A breeze brushed past, cool and deliberate, like an unseen hand caressing his cheek. He closed his eyes, uneasy. Behind him, someone's shadow shifted in the reflection of his car window. But when he turned, no one was there. He left flowers, unaware that the orphan girl had been there earlier, kneeling by the same grave, tracing the name Aisha Bello Owolabi with her trembling fingers. That night, as the city slept, the bride-to-be stood before a mirror, whispering softly, "Tomorrow, he will remember." The morning of the wedding arrived with a golden Lagos sunrise that seemed too bright, too calm, as if heaven itself was holding its breath. The Owolabi mansion buzzed with activity, caterers setting up tents, photographers adjusting lenses, drummers rehearsing rhythms that echoed through the estate. Tunde sat in his dressing room, staring at his reflection. His tailored white agbada fit perfectly, but his eyes betrayed unrest. His best man Deely clapped him on the back. "My brother, today you close the chapter of sorrow. No more ghosts." Tunde managed a thin smile, though his stomach churned. In the corner of the mirror, he thought he saw a white figure pass behind him, soft and swift. He blinked, and it vanished. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his cufflinks. Somewhere deep inside, An unease whispered that this wedding would not end in laughter. Downstairs, Halima, the bride, was being dressed by women from the church. They tied her jewel and adjusted the veil with reverence. "You're a blessed woman," one said. But as they turned, one of them gasped. The bride's reflection in the mirror seemed wrong. Her face flickered for a second, darker eyes, sharper cheekbones, and then returned to normal. The women exchanged nervous glances. "Just like playing tricks," another muttered, forcing a laugh. But Halima sat silently, her hands folded. She whispered something under her breath, words the others couldn't hear. "I am ready." Outside, the air felt thick like the moment before rain. Birds circled the compound in restless patterns. Even the family cat refused to leave the doorway. At noon, the convoy left for the cathedral. The roads were cleared by police escorts, sirens slicing through traffic. Spectators lined the streets, shouting blessings and recording videos. "God bless the couple," they yelled, unaware of the storm within the groom's chest. In the car, Tunda stared out the tinted window, his heart heavy. "She's a good girl," his mother said softly. "Don't shame her at the altar." He nodded mechanically. "I won't, Mama." But when he looked up again, he saw for a split second Aisha's reflection in the window instead of his own. Her eyes sad, lips moving without sound. He jerked his head back. Nothing. Just his pale face staring back. Sweat formed along his hairline. Maybe he needed rest. Maybe this was guilt playing tricks. The cathedral glowed with white lilies and golden drapes. It was majestic, a symbol of wealth and faith. Tunda took his place before the altar, hands clasped tight. The choir sang softly, the organ humming beneath their voices. Guests murmured in admiration. Then the doors opened. The bride entered, veiled, her steps slow and graceful. Every camera turned toward her. Tundi felt his heart skip. For a reason he couldn't name, his chest tightened and his palms went cold. Each step she took echoed louder in his head. When she reached the altar, she didn't look up. The priest smiled, opening his Bible. The ceremony began, vows, prayers, laughter, until it was time to unveil the bride. As she lifted the veil, Tunde froze again, but this time something deeper than fear took hold. It was recognition. He had seen that face, not in dreams, but in death. The congregation gasped. Tunde's vision blurred as he tried to make sense of what stood before him. The bride's face, though softer, framed differently, was unmistakably Aisha's. He blinked rapidly, convincing himself it was a coincidence, a cruel resemblance, but the tiny birthmark under her left eye destroyed that hope. His mind flashed back to that night. The flames, her screams, her final promise. "If you love me, you'll find me again." Was this her? A twin? A spirit? The questions tore through him like glass. The priest hesitated, sensing the tension. "My son, do you take this woman?" Tunde's throat closed. Sweat dampened his collar. His lips parted, but no sound came out. The bride smiled faintly, her gaze steady. "Say it," she whispered. "You already did, 3 years ago." In the front pew, his mother whispered frantic prayers. "Jesu Oluwa, not today." Some guests stood, craning their necks. Dele tried to signal Tunde to recover himself, but Tunde's eyes were locked on hers. Every instinct told him to run, but another force, guilt, maybe love, rooted him there. The priest repeated the question. "Do you take this woman?" A heavy silence filled the cathedral. Finally, trembling, he forced the words out. "I do." The crowd erupted in applause, mistaking his terror for emotion. The bride closed her eyes briefly, as if sealing an ancient pact. When she opened them again, a single tear slipped down her cheek. For a moment, Tunde thought he saw smoke drift behind her veil, faint, grey like a memory of fire. Then it disappeared. After the ceremony, while guests celebrated, Tunde excused himself. He found himself outside by the cathedral fountain, breathing hard. His reflection in the water looked pale and hollow. Suddenly, the bride's reflection appeared beside his, though she wasn't there in person. "You kept your word," her voice echoed softly, though no one stood beside him. He stumbled back, eyes wide. Then the car horns, laughter, and music resumed, breaking his trance. "Tunde!" Dele called. "Come for pictures." He turned slowly. The bride was indeed by the door now, smiling normally, waving. Was he losing his mind? He forced a smile and returned, his heart pounding. At the reception, every guest toasted them as the couple of the century. The band played Fuji tunes, dancers spun, and wine flowed like rivers. Tunde raised his glass but barely drank. His eyes never left his new wife. She moved through the crowd gracefully, greeting elders, laughing at jokes. Yet, every time their eyes met, she gave him that same knowing look, the one that said, "You know me, but you wish you didn't." When the cake cutting began, she leaned toward him and whispered, "Till death do us part, again." His hand froze mid-air. The laughter around them dimmed in his ears. All he could hear was his own heartbeat and the faint sound of crackling fire, as if the past had come alive again. As the reception ended, the MC took the microphone. "Before we continue," he said cheerfully, "if you're enjoying this love story tonight, clap your hands for the couple." The crowd roared. The bride smiled at Tunde, her lips forming a phrase only he could read. "You can't run from a promise." His glass slipped, shattering on the floor. The sound silenced the room. Cameras flashed. Guests stared. Tunde forced a laugh, pretending it was nothing. But, deep inside, he knew the woman he married wasn't here for love. She was here for unfinished business. The mansion was silent when they returned that night. The drummers had long gone, the lights dimmed, and the fragrance of champagne still lingered in the corridors. Tunde loosened his agbada and sat heavily on the edge of the bed, staring at the door. His new bride, his wife, was still downstairs thanking the last few guests. He rubbed his temples, trying to steady his thoughts. "This isn't Aisha," he told himself. "It can't be." The human mind, he reasoned, played tricks when burdened by guilt. But when the door creaked open and she stepped in, dressed in a white wrapper and head tie, carrying a brass tray of water, his breath caught. "It's tradition," she said softly, "for a bride to wash her husband's feet." He hesitated, uneasy. "Who told you that?" She smiled faintly. "You did. Once by the river at night." His heart froze. That was something only Aisha would know. He had said those exact words before the fire consumed her. She knelt gracefully and placed the bowl before him. Steam rose from the water, though it wasn't hot. Tunde's hands trembled as he whispered, "Who are you?" She lifted her head slowly, her face half in shadow, and said, "The woman you left behind." Then she dipped her hand into the water and began to wash his feet gently, humming a familiar tune, the lullaby Aisha used to hum when he couldn't sleep. The melody wrapped around him like smoke, sweet and suffocating. He watched her hands move, soft, deliberate, calm. When she looked up, her eyes shimmered strangely, reflecting candlelight that flickered without wind. He blinked, and the moment passed. "Rest, my husband," she said, standing. "Tomorrow is the beginning." The words lingered, chilling him. He looked down again, and the water in the bowl had turned murky, swirling like ash. Tunde couldn't sleep. He paced the room while she lay beside him, perfectly still, her breathing too steady, almost rehearsed. Around midnight, the power went out. The air grew heavy, thick with heat. He reached for his phone, but it wouldn't turn on. Suddenly he heard whispering, or soft, rhythmic, coming from the mirror. He turned sharply. The reflection showed the bed, but the bride's figure was sitting upright, eyes open, staring into the dark, even though on the bed she appeared to be lying down. Cold dread flooded his veins. He blinked rapidly. The image flickered, then corrected itself. "It's stress," he muttered to himself. But a faint scent of smoke drifted through the air, sharp and nostalgic. He looked toward her and whispered, "Aisha?" The name escaped his lips like a secret. Her eyes opened instantly. "You called?" she murmured, smiling in the dark. The next morning, the staff avoided looking at her. The chef crossed himself when she passed. The housekeeper later whispered to the driver, "Ogre's new wife walks barefoot at midnight." The driver nodded, eyes wide. "And I heard her talking to someone at the pool, but she was alone." Rumours spread through the household like wildfire, but no one dared speak openly. Tunde tried to act normal. Meetings, calls, public smiles, but his composure cracked. During breakfast, she served him jollof rice and asked casually, "Do you still visit the cemetery?" He nearly dropped his spoon. "Why do you ask?" "Because you left something unfinished," she said, her tone calm, distant. When he looked up, she was smiling gently, as though she hadn't said anything strange. His phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "Does your wife remember the fire too?" That evening he drove alone to the cemetery, desperate for sense. The guards at the gate nodded respectfully. He walked to Aisha's grave carrying white roses. But when he arrived, his heart stopped. The grave was open. The marble slab was cracked down the middle, as though struck by lightning. A burnt piece of veil lay on the soil, still smelling faintly of smoke. His knees weakened. The wind howled through the trees, whispering something that sounded eerily like laughter. He stumbled back, clutching his chest. "This can't be real," he gasped. His phone buzzed again. "Go home, Tunde. She's waiting." No number. No name. He dropped the flowers and ran to his car. The sky rumbled above Lagos, and thunder rolled like the echo of a promise he could no longer escape. By the time Tunde returned to the mansion, rain had begun to fall, slow, deliberate drops that tapped against the windows like warning knocks. The gate guards said they hadn't seen his wife all evening. He entered the living room and found the candles lit, the air thick with perfume and the faint scent of smoke. On the grand piano rested a framed photograph of him and Aisha from years ago, one that had burned in the fire. He froze. "Where did you get this?" he whispered. A voice came from behind him, soft and calm. "It was never lost." He turned. She stood by the staircase in a flowing white gown, her hair damp, her eyes glistening like dark pearls. "Why are you doing this?" he demanded. She tilted her head. "You said you'd find me in every lifetime. Did you forget your own vow?" He backed away slowly. "You're not real. Aisha died." Her smile didn't fade. Death changes nothing when love is unfinished. She began descending the stairs, her steps echoing faintly. The lights flickered. Tunde's phone buzzed again, Dile calling. He snatched it up. "Dile, come here now." But the line cut off. He looked up, and she was standing right before him, impossibly close. Her perfume smelled like firewood and rain. "Look at me, Tunde," she whispered. "Am I not who you wanted?" He stared, trembling. Her face shimmered slightly. One moment soft and human, the next scorched and ash-streaked. He blinked and stumbled backward. She sighed, almost tenderly. "You built your empire on broken promises. I came to collect what was left." Then she smiled, serene. "Your peace." The following morning, the mansion staff found Tunde asleep on the living room couch, pale and drenched in sweat. The framed photo was gone, the candles burned to wax pools. When he woke, the house was silent. He searched every room. His wife was nowhere. Her clothes hung neatly in the wardrobe, untouched. The bed was perfectly made, yet on the mirror, written in faint streaks of ash, were the words, "Till death do us part." Again. He collapsed onto the chair, shaking. That phrase, that handwriting, it was hers. But how could she vanish like smoke? He called his mother. "Mama, I need a priest," he said hoarsely. Her voice trembled. "Tunde, I warned you. Some women don't belong among the living." His mind spun. Mama, are you saying she's… I'm saying pray, and don't sleep under the same roof tonight. That evening, Dele arrived, armed with confusion and disbelief. Guy, this is madness, he said, pacing. You're stressed. Let's go to your beach house. Get away. But as he spoke, his phone buzzed. He frowned. She just texted me. Tell him I'm home. They stared at each other. Slowly, Tunda turned toward the grand staircase. A shadow moved at the top, faint and fluid. The scent of smoke filled the air again. You see that? Dele whispered, his voice cracking. Tunda nodded slowly, tears in his eyes. I see her, he whispered, and she's not done. The chandelier above flickered, and the piano keys pressed themselves softly, playing the same lullaby from the night before. The two men froze. Dele whispered, Let's leave now. But Tundi stood motionless, staring up the stairs as her voice drifted down again, calm, tender, inevitable. You promised me forever. As the last light in the mansion went out, thunder shook the sky. The rain outside intensified, flooding the courtyard. Yet upstairs, one window glowed faintly. The bridal room. Inside, a candle burned steadily beside a mirror now cracked down the centre. And in that mirror, her reflection smiled though no one stood before it. The following morning, Lagos felt unusually heavy, the kind of morning where the sky stayed grey and even the air carried secrets. Tunda hadn't slept. He sat in his car outside his mother's estate, his eyes bloodshot, his suit rumpled. The guards opened the gate quickly. His mother had been expecting him. Chief Morenike Owolabi was in her prayer room, surrounded by burning candles and opened Bibles. She looked up as he entered. You saw her again, didn't you? She asked quietly. He nodded. She called herself Aisha. She knows things only Aisha could know. His mother sighed deeply. I told you not to let the dead hear your promises. Tunda stared, confused. What are you saying? She rose slowly, her wrapper rustling like dry leaves. 3 years ago, before she died, did you make any vow? He swallowed hard. I told her that if I ever lost her, I would find her again, no matter what it cost. His mother's eyes filled with fear. Then you brought her back. She led him to the family shrine, a small hut behind the house that smelled of age and palm oil. Symbols marked the walls, faded cowries, red cloth, calabashes filled with charcoal. Your grandfather warned us, she murmured. Love oaths are dangerous when sealed with tears. Tundi frowned. Mama, that's superstition. She turned sharply. And what you're seeing isn't. Silence filled the room. I went to a prophet, she continued, after you announced the wedding. He said a spirit walks in your shadow wearing the face of your past. He told me to stop the wedding, but pride wouldn't let me shame the family. Tunda's chest tightened. So you knew? She closed her eyes. I hoped it was a mistake, but when I saw her yesterday, I knew the spirit had returned, not for marriage, but for balance. That evening, Tunda met with the prophet his mother mentioned, a thin, elderly man named Baba Folarin, known for helping the wealthy confront unseen forces. His house sat on the outskirts of Ikorodu. Quiet and surrounded by ancient trees, the prophet welcomed him with calm eyes. You came with a shadow, he said before Tunda even spoke. It followed your car. Tunda froze. What is she? Baba Folarin stirred the smoke from his pot of herbs. Once human, now bound. A restless soul clinging to an unfinished vow. When you promised love beyond death, you opened a door, and she came through it, not in peace, but in pain. Tunda clenched his fists. So how do I close it? The old man looked up slowly. You must return what you took from her, the thing you promised. Confused, Tunda demanded, What did I take? The prophet gestured toward the small shrine. Look inside yourself. You promised eternity, but you gave her fire. You buried her without truth. You moved on with guilt instead of peace. She returned for the vow, not vengeance. Tunde stood, pacing. You're saying she's here because I failed to keep my word? Baba Folarin nodded. And because she died believing you left her to burn alone. The words pierced him like knives. He dropped to his knees. Then what must I do? The prophet handed him a small gourd. Before the next full moon, go to the place where she died. Speak her name. Confess your truth. Only honesty breaks a cursed vow. Tunde took the gourd with trembling hands, whispering, I'll do anything. The prophet nodded slowly. Then prepare, for she will not let go easily. That night Tunde drove home in silence, the gourd on the seat beside him. The city lights blurred past like ghosts. At every red light, he thought he saw her reflection in the rearview mirror, calm, smiling. When he reached his mansion, the gate swung open before he even honked. The guards were gone. The compound was empty, and at the doorway stood his wife wearing her wedding dress again, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. You went to him, she said softly. You think he can undo what love has done? His hands trembled on the steering wheel. What do you want from me? She stepped closer, her voice barely human now. Only the truth, Tunde. Tell them what happened the night I died. His heart raced. I tried to save you. She tilted her head sadly. Did you? Thunder cracked above them, and the lights of the mansion flickered violently as her form began to blur like smoke. She was fading, but her voice still lingered. Confess, and I'll rest. Lie again, and I'll stay forever. For 2 days, Tunde didn't leave the mansion. The city outside kept moving. Traffic, laughter, business as usual. But inside those marble walls, time stood still. The bride's presence lingered like perfume and ash. Every mirror reflected her silhouette. Every quiet corner hummed with her old song. He avoided his room, sleeping on the couch instead, holding the prophet's gourd like a weapon. But the haunting grew bolder. Doors opened on their own. Her voice called his name from the corridors. Once, while bathing, he looked into the water and saw her face beneath the surface, smiling faintly. He screamed and stumbled out, shaking. Exhausted and desperate, he called Dele again. Come over, he said weakly. I can't face her alone. Dele hesitated. Bro, this is beyond me. Get help. I did, Tunde whispered, and it told me the truth might kill me. That evening, lightning struck a palm tree near the gate, setting it ablaze. The staff fled, shouting prayers. Inside, Tunde stood in the living room as the wind howled through broken windows. His wife appeared again, barefoot, her gown fluttering though there was no breeze. Do you remember the night of the fire? She asked quietly. He clenched his jaw. You were trapped. I tried to... You left me, she interrupted, her voice trembling. You ran when the roof fell. You saved the documents, not me. Tears stung his eyes. I came back. I came back for you. She shook her head slowly. You came back when it was too late. I called your name, but you were gone. He fell to his knees, sobbing. I couldn't reach you. I thought you were dead. Her voice softened. Then why did you bury an empty coffin? Tunde froze, staring up at her. What are you saying? She stepped closer, her form flickering like a candle flame. They never found my body, Tunde. You didn't look long enough. His breathing quickened. That's not true, she smiled faintly. Then dig and see what you buried. She turned toward the door. Meet me at the ashes. Bring the truth with you. Then she vanished, leaving behind only the scent of smoke and the faint sound of humming. The chandelier above him swayed though no wind moved. He sat there trembling, the weight of guilt pressing on his chest. Outside, thunder cracked again, shaking the windows. That night, he sat by the window, staring into the rain-soaked city. Memories attacked him, the night of the fire, the argument, the explosion of anger before the tragedy. He had accused Aisha of betrayal. She had begged him to listen. He stormed out, slamming the door. Minutes later, the generator exploded. Flames consumed everything. He returned too late. He never saw her again. Or so he thought. Now the truth crawled back to life. Maybe she never died. Maybe someone had saved her. Maybe he buried a lie, and guilt had dressed it in ghosts. He stood abruptly, grabbed the gourd and whispered, "If she wants the truth, she'll get it." Before dawn, he packed his car and drove toward the ruins of his old estate. The place where everything began and ended. The road was slick, deserted, and wrapped in mist. The prophet's words echoed in his head. Only honesty breaks a cursed vow. He parked near the blackened remains of the house and stepped out, heart hammering. The air smelled of wet earth and charred memories. As he walked toward the site, lightning illuminated something. A figure standing by the ruins, waiting. She was there, in white, her veil glowing faintly. He stopped, trembling. "I came," he whispered. She smiled softly. "Then speak." He dropped to his knees, voice breaking. "I left you that night because I was afraid. I thought saving you meant losing everything. I was wrong." Rain poured as if heaven itself wept. She looked at him with eyes full of sorrow and relief. "Then the vow is fulfilled." Slowly she began to fade, her form dissolving into light. He reached out, crying, "Wait!" But she only smiled, whispering, "Now I can rest." The wind calmed, the rain softened, and for the first time in years, silence felt peaceful. He knelt there, shaking, staring at the spot where she vanished. The gourd in his hand cracked, releasing a faint glow that flickered out like the end of a candle. He bowed his head. "Forgive me." A gentle breeze brushed his face, almost like a final touch. Then everything went still. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share with your friends. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Tunde's place? Days passed after that night at the ruins, and Lagos carried on as if nothing had happened. But for Tunde Owolabi, the world had shifted forever. He returned to the city hollow-eyed, his voice barely above a whisper. The newspapers called it the billionaire's tragedy. Bride disappears after wedding. Cameras swarmed his gate, staff resigned, and business partners kept their distance. But Tunde didn't care. For the first time in years, he felt strangely light, as though a burden had lifted. The haunting had stopped. The mirrors were quiet, the house still. Yet beneath that calm, a new question haunted him. What if she had never died at all? He couldn't rest until he knew. So he hired an investigator, a quiet, discreet man named Kunle Adesina, known for finding what others buried. "Find out what really happened the night of the fire," Tunde ordered. Kunle adjusted his glasses and said, "We'll start with who was there, Wa, and who profited after her death." A week later, Kunle returned with files, photographs, and a look of disbelief. "Sir, the reports from the police were altered," he began. "The explosion wasn't from the generator. It was deliberate." Tunde froze. "You mean someone set it?" Kunle nodded. "And it gets worse. The woman's body was never officially confirmed. The report you saw was a forgery." Tunde leaned back, his chest tightening. "Who would forge her death?" Kunle hesitated. "Your late fiancé's next of kin signed off the burial document." Tunde frowned. "Aisha had no family." Kunle pushed a photograph forward, grainy, black and white, showing a woman at a registry office. Her scarf covered her face, but her hand, bearing Aisha's birthmark, held a pen. "That signature is hers," Kunle said quietly. Tunde stared at the image until it blurred. "Then who did I bury?" The next day he visited the orphanage where Halima, his bride, had supposedly come from. The matron, a weary woman named Sister Doyen, recognized the photo instantly. "Ah, yes," she said nervously. "That woman came months ago. She donated money and said she would sponsor one of our girls for marriage." Tunde's blood ran cold. She arranged her own return, he murmured. But why? Sister Doyen lowered her voice. She said she had unfinished business with a man who broke her promise. Tunde stumbled back. She said that? Yes, the matron nodded, uneasy. She also left this letter and said the man would come for it. She handed him an envelope sealed with red wax. His fingers trembled as he opened it. Inside, the handwriting was unmistakable. If you find this, I am not your ghost, Tunde. I am your consequence. That night, Tunde sat in his study, reading the letter over and over. It explained everything. The night of the fire, her survival, her anger, and her return under another name. When you left me, it read, I crawled out through the servants' gate. The burns healed, but the betrayal didn't. I lived in silence, watched you rise, watched you forget. I became the woman no one wanted. Because I wanted you to see what pride looks like when it's stripped of wealth. You promised to find me again, and you did. Not by fate, but by guilt. He dropped the paper, his throat tight. So she wasn't a ghost. She had returned, alive, reborn through vengeance, wearing pain as disguise. And the haunting? It was her theatre of punishment, a mirror to his own cowardice. He wept for the first time in years. By dawn, Tunde had made a decision. He couldn't let her vanish again, not without closure, not without forgiveness. He told Kunle, find her, dead or alive. The investigator nodded grimly. There's one place she might have gone. The riverbank near Badagry. She mentioned it often in her hospital record. Hospital record? Tunde echoed. Yes, Kunle said quietly. She was treated for burns there. Under another name, Halima Bello. The realization hit him like a storm. The woman he married was indeed Aisha, alive, scarred, and determined to make him live his own nightmare. He leaned back, whispering, she married me to make me remember. Outside, dawn broke over Lagos, painting the sky red, the colour of truth and consequence. The journey to Badagry was quiet, the road long and empty. The Atlantic wind carried salt and sorrow, whispering through the palm trees. Tunde drove alone, without security or entourage. The world of luxury and pride that once surrounded him felt meaningless now. All that mattered was understanding. As he approached the riverbank, he saw a small hut by the water, a fisherman's shack, old but clean. Smoke rose gently from the chimney. He parked and walked slowly toward it, heart pounding. The door creaked open before he knocked. A woman stood there, her face half covered with a scarf. Even through the fabric, he knew those eyes. Aisha, he whispered. She didn't move. You found me, she said simply. Her voice was calm, almost peaceful. He stepped forward, emotion choking him. Why all this? Why pretend to be dead? Why haunt me? She smiled faintly. Because you killed me before the fire ever did. He froze, confused. What do you mean? She gestured for him to sit. Inside the hut, the walls were lined with burnt photographs, pieces of their past. You left me when I needed you most, she said softly. Not in flames, but in silence. You saved your empire, your pride, your image, not the woman who built it with you. He bowed his head. I was wrong. I let fear control me. No, she said. You let ego destroy us. So I became what you feared, a reminder. Every nightmare you had was your conscience made flesh. He looked at her scarred hands, trembling slightly. Why didn't you just tell me you lived? Because you buried me alive in your memory, she said. I needed you to see what that grave felt like. Her voice cracked on the last word. For a long moment they sat in silence, the sound of waves filling the room. Then she said quietly, the curse wasn't mine, Tunde. It was yours. Guilt that refused to rest. I just gave it a face. He looked up, eyes glistening. Can you forgive me? She hesitated, then sighed. Forgiveness is not a gift. It's surrender. Can you live with the truth instead? He nodded slowly. If it means setting you free. She smiled faintly and stood. Then my work here is done. He rose, desperate. Where will you go? She turned toward the doorway where sunlight poured in like gold. Anywhere you aren't worshipped more than you're loved. And with that, she walked toward the river, her scarf fluttering behind her like a final whisper. Tunde followed, his steps heavy in the wet sand. She stood by the edge of the water watching the horizon. Aisha, he called, his voice breaking. She turned once more, her eyes soft, her expression almost serene. I loved you, Tunde. That was never the lie. The lie was thinking love could survive without truth. Then she stepped into the river, walking slowly until the water reached her waist, then her shoulders. He ran forward shouting, Come back! But she didn't look back. The river shimmered with light, then grew still. Only her scarf floated back to shore. He fell to his knees, clutching it, sobbing uncontrollably as the sun set behind the waves. When he finally stood, the wind whispered her song, faint but forgiving. He looked at the horizon and murmured, Rest now. Then he turned away, leaving his footprints beside hers, half erased by the tide. Back in Lagos, the media still called it the vanishing bride mystery. But in his heart, Tunde knew the truth. Some ghosts walk not to haunt, but to heal. If you've watched this far, you deserve to know. Every promise has a price. Tell me in the comments, what lesson did you take from this story? 2 weeks after Aisha disappeared into the Badagry River, Lagos had already turned her story into legend. Newspapers called it The Bride Who Vanished. Talk shows debated whether she was a ghost, a con artist, or a symbol of betrayal. On social media, hashtags trended with her name. But for Tunde Owolabi, it was no longer a headline, it was a wound. He stayed away from the public eye, rarely leaving his mansion. His companies ran without him. Board meetings happened in silence. The once vibrant billionaire had become a shadow. Every morning he walked to the edge of his compound and stared at the sea beyond the city skyline. Sometimes he thought he heard her voice in the wind. Truth is the only burial the heart accepts. The words echoed until he whispered them back. His mother visited often, bringing pastors and herbalists, each promising peace. None could offer it. You must let her go, she urged one afternoon. Holding her memory is feeding her spirit. He nodded but said nothing, because deep down, he didn't want to let her go. He wanted forgiveness, not just for what he did, but for what he had become after her. He spent hours in his study, rereading the letter she left, tracing her handwriting with his fingers, as if memorizing her existence all over again. Then one night, something strange happened. As he dozed off on the couch, the mansion lights flickered. The piano played 3 soft notes, her song. He froze. Slowly, he turned. On the piano sat her wedding veil, folded neatly, though he'd buried it at the riverbank. His heart pounded. He picked it up, trembling. The fabric was cold and damp, as if it had just come out of water. Inside its folds was a small, charred photograph, the two of them smiling years ago before everything went wrong. On the back, in her handwriting, were 4 words: Finish what you started. Tunde stayed awake till dawn, staring at those words. The phrase gnawed at his mind. What had he left unfinished? He thought about her last confession. You buried an empty coffin. What if she was right? What if her body had never been found, not because she walked into the river, but because someone had ensured she disappeared? Twice? He called Kunle, his investigator. We need to find out who handled her burial records, all of them, from day one. Kunle sounded tired but intrigued. I already started checking, he said. And you won't like what I found. By noon, Kunle arrived at the mansion with documents and a grave expression. Your late fiancée's case wasn't closed legally, he said. Her file was sealed under a private court order by someone in your company. Tunde frowned. My company? Kunle nodded. Yes, the order came from your head of legal affairs, Mr. Bamidele Okon. Tunde leaned back, stunned. Why would Bamidele? Because, Kunle interrupted, he was the one who insured her life under your corporate name. And after her death, he collected the payout. 80 million naira. Silence fell. The room spun. The haunting wasn't just supernatural, it had roots in greed. Someone had profited from her death, and Tunde had unknowingly paid for it. The next morning, Tunde marched into his corporate headquarters for the first time in weeks. Employees whispered as he walked past, their eyes wide. He entered Bamidele's office without knocking. The man looked up, startled. Oga, you're back? Tunde slammed the documents on the table. Explain this. Bamidele's face paled. Where did you... The insurance, the forged report, the fake burial. You did all this. His voice thundered through the room. You think I wouldn't find out? Bamidele stammered. Sir, it wasn't what you think. She asked me to. Tunde froze. Who asked you? Aisha, Bamidele whispered, shaking. She came to me after the fire. Alive. She said you couldn't know. She made me declare her dead so she could disappear. The confession hit Tunde like lightning. You're saying she was alive all along, and you helped her vanish? Bamidele nodded miserably. She said she needed to be forgotten to survive. She gave me half the insurance money to transfer to her new identity. Tunde grabbed him by the collar. Where is she now? I don't know, Bamidele cried. She told me never to look for her again, that her vengeance would end when you saw her face one last time. Tunde released him, breathless. So the marriage, the haunting, the vanishing, all part of her final message. She hadn't just punished him. She had revealed the corruption buried in his empire. She had made him see what greed had turned them both into. He turned away slowly. You'll return every kobo, he said coldly. And then you'll confess publicly. That evening, Tunde called for a press conference. The hall was filled with reporters, cameras flashing. He stood at the podium, no longer the proud billionaire, but a humbled man. 3 years ago, he began, I made a promise I did not keep. I lost someone because I valued power more than love. And when I tried to bury the truth, it came back to bury me. The crowd murmured, unsure if this was confession or madness. He continued, voice steady. Her name was Aisha Bello Owolabi, and she deserves her peace. He turned to the cameras. If she's watching, I want her to know. I'm no longer running. I'm ready to tell the world what happened. He handed the evidence to the journalists and stepped back. For the first time, he felt free. The weight in his chest lifted, and his eyes filled with tears that weren't from fear, but release. That night, the broadcast went viral. Every channel replayed his confession. People who once mocked him now wept. Even the skeptics admitted it. There was something powerful, almost spiritual in his honesty. Around midnight, as the city slept, Tunde sat on his balcony, watching the rain fall softly. The sea breeze brushed his face, and he thought he heard a whisper. You finally told the truth. He smiled faintly, closing his eyes. Rest now, Aisha. A soft light flickered across the room. He turned. The piano played again. A single note, gentle and final. Then silence. The veil on the piano slowly dissolved into thin air, as if carried away by unseen hands. At dawn, Tunde stood by his window, watching the first sunlight touch the city. For the first time in years, he didn't feel haunted. He felt whole. The house, once heavy with ghosts, now felt like home again. As he sipped his tea, a message appeared on his phone from an unknown number. It was a photo. The riverbank at Badagry, with 2 sets of footprints leading into the water. Beneath it were 3 words. Love kept promise. His hand trembled, but he smiled. "Goodbye, Aisha," he whispered. Outside, the wind carried her song once more, this time peaceful. Sometimes love doesn't return to haunt us. It returns to heal us. If this story touched your heart, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Let's keep these stories alive. In the weeks following his public confession, the world's perception of Tunde Owolabi began to shift. The same media that once mocked him now painted him as the billionaire who told the truth. His sincerity struck a chord. Churches invited him to speak, magazines published essays about redemption and the weight of promises. Yet for Tunde, none of it mattered. His wealth still existed, but he no longer measured life in contracts or assets. He began selling his properties quietly, donating the money to burn wards and orphanages, especially those housing children with scars like Aisha's. One afternoon, as he visited one of the hospitals, a nurse led him to a ward where a little girl with bandaged arms smiled shyly at him. "She's been through fire too," the nurse said. The child whispered, "My mummy says scars mean we survived." Tunde knelt beside her, tears forming. "Yes," he said softly, "and surviving is the bravest thing anyone can do." That night he sat by his window, looking at the stars over Lagos Lagoon. The air was calm, scented with rain and sea. He thought of Aisha's last message, "Love kept promise." It echoed in his heart like a blessing and a reminder. He wondered if she was at peace wherever she was. Then, quietly, he whispered into the night, "You found peace when I found truth." A soft breeze swept through the curtains, carrying the faintest hint of perfume. Hers. He smiled. It was not fear anymore. It was grace. Somewhere beyond the veil of life and death, forgiveness had become their shared language. The next morning, Kunle arrived with news. "Sir, the insurance case has been fully closed. Bamidele confessed, and the money is being redirected to a charity under her name, the Aisha Foundation for Burn Victims." Tunde nodded, his eyes brightening. "Make sure it grows beyond both of us," he said. "Let her legacy heal what we destroyed." He spent the next month setting up the foundation's first centre, a modern hospital in Yaba, free for anyone suffering from burns or trauma. He named its main hall the Promise Ward. At the inauguration, he addressed the small crowd. "This place is built not from guilt, but from gratitude, for second chances, for truth, and for the kind of love that teaches us, even in its silence." After the ceremony, a reporter approached him. "Mr. Owolabi," she asked, "do you believe Aisha is still with you?" He paused, then smiled faintly. "Every time I tell the truth, I feel her near." His answer trended across social media, but to him, it wasn't publicity. It was prayer. Later that evening, as he left the hospital, he saw an old woman sitting under the mango tree by the gate, humming softly. She looked up and said, "You did well, son. The dead rest easier when the living remember rightly." He blinked, and she was gone. For a brief second, he thought he heard Aisha's song again, woven into the hum of the city. When he returned home, the mansion no longer felt haunted. It was peaceful, alive with gentle sounds, birds on the terrace, wind through curtains, the soft ticking of a clock. On the piano sat only one thing, a folded white scarf. He picked it up and smiled. "Thank you," he whispered. The haunting had ended, but the love, that had only just begun its afterlife. Months passed, and Tunde began rebuilding not just his business, but himself. The man who once chased perfection now chased meaning. He spent mornings at the foundation, afternoons mentoring orphans in business literacy, and evenings in quiet reflection. The tabloids lost interest, but people who had been touched by Aisha's story continued to write letters, thanking him for his honesty. Some even sent stories of their own, apologies never made, promises never kept. Tunde read each one and replied personally, signing every letter with the same line. "Truth is how love breathes." The phrase became the foundation's motto. One evening, while reviewing donations, a parcel arrived with no sender's name. Inside was a flash drive and a note. "For your ears only." He plugged it into his laptop. A video played, grainy, softly lit, filmed beside the riverbank. Aisha stood there, wearing the same white scarf, smiling gently. "If you're seeing this," she said, "then I am gone for real this time. Don't chase me anymore. You already did what you were meant to do. You told the truth. I forgave you the moment you faced yourself. Promise me you'll keep helping others find their peace." Her voice trembled slightly. "Love doesn't die. It transforms. Let mine become something that heals others." Then the video faded to black. Tunde sat there for a long time, tears running freely. He replayed the video twice, memorizing every inflection of her voice. For the first time, he felt no ache, only gratitude. The next day, he called a meeting of his board members. "From now on," he announced, "our company's profit share goes to charity, 10% every year. We'll live by the principle that saved my life: honesty." Some executives looked uneasy, others inspired. But Tunde didn't care about approval anymore. He had been rich once. Now he wanted to be whole. Weeks later, the foundation grew into a nationwide movement. Volunteers, donors, and even survivors joined the cause. They told stories on YouTube, spreading messages of courage and truth. Each episode ended with Tunde's closing line: "Every scar is a story, and every story deserves peace." Viewers around the world sent messages from Kenya, Ghana, South Africa, Canada, and the US, sharing how the tale of the bride no one wanted had touched them. The story became more than his. It became a mirror for everyone who had ever hurt or been haunted by love. One night, he returned to Badagry alone. The tide was low, the moon pale and golden. He sat by the same riverbank where she had vanished and whispered, "I kept the promise." The waves whispered back, soft and approving. He closed his eyes, feeling her presence not as a ghost but as warmth, gentle and everlasting. When he rose to leave, the scarf he once found floating on the water now rested folded neatly on the sand beside him. He smiled, tears mixing with sea mist. "I know," he said softly, "you never left." A year later, the Aisha Foundation had expanded to 5 countries. Documentaries were made, scholarships launched, and countless lives changed. Tunde Owolabi's name became synonymous not with wealth but with redemption. Yet, he never remarried. When asked why, he would smile and say, "Some promises don't end at the altar." He lived quietly in a smaller home near the sea, surrounded by books, children's laughter, and the echo of peace. Every evening, he would sit on his balcony with a cup of tea, watching the sunset melt into the waves. That was his new ritual. Not mourning, but gratitude. On the first anniversary of Aisha's foundation, a ceremony was held at the Yaba Center. Survivors, doctors, and volunteers gathered to celebrate. Tunde gave a speech that left the hall silent. "A year ago," he began, "I stood before the world ashamed. Today, I stand humbled. I learned that love is not proven by perfection, but by truth. If you love someone, tell them now. Don't wait for fire, loss, or regret to teach you." The crowd applauded, some in tears. As he stepped down from the stage, a young woman handed him a bouquet. "Thank you for saving my brother," she whispered. "He watched your story and chose to live." Tunde smiled, overcome. "No," he said softly. "Aisha saved him." That night, back home, the sea wind carried familiar scents again. Faint smoke and gardenia. He lit a candle by the piano, where her memory always lingered. For a moment, he thought he heard her voice whisper his name. Not in sorrow, but in peace. He smiled and said, "I hear you." Then he played the same 3 notes she loved, the ones that always ended her lullaby. The candle flickered, casting shadows that danced like silk, and then steadied, glowing warm and steady, as if someone unseen had joined him. He spoke softly into the quiet, words that felt both like prayer and farewell. Aisha, I kept every promise you taught me. You found rest, and I found truth. The wind sighed gently through the open window, carrying his words into the night. Outside, the waves rolled endlessly, erasing footprints, renewing the shore, a reminder that every ending carries the seed of peace. The story of the billionaire who married the bride no one wanted spread far beyond Nigeria, translated into languages told around fires and classrooms. It became a modern African parable about pride, guilt, forgiveness, and love that transcends mortality. In every retelling, people said the same thing, that Aisha's ghost never came to haunt, she came to heal. Remember this, dear listener, when truth becomes love, even the dead can rest. Drop a comment, share your thoughts, and tell me, have you ever kept a promise that changed you forever?